Hey guys, it's Tori, and today I'm going to be discussing 30 classics that I'd like to finish before I am 30 years old. I turned 26 a couple of months ago, and I was thinking about doing this video at the time, but there were other things I decided to prioritize, and I was like, do I really want to put this pressure on myself? But I was like, you know what, 30 classics, I have 4 years, and usually I read maybe not quite 30 every year, but around like between 20 and 30 every year. So I feel like I definitely be able to do it while still also reading a bunch of other classics that I'd like to read. But these are specifically ones that I have had on my TBR for a long time, whether physically or I just have been aware of it for a long time and only recently purchased it, but like I've been wanting to read it for years. And I think it's time for me to do it. I will say there's one series on this list that I want to complete, and so technically there's more than 30 books on this list, but I decided that it was worth it to me to have that completion of that series on this list because I really do want to do that in the next 4 years, and we'll see how it goes. I don't know, I'm really hoping I get my reading mojo back because this year, while not terrible, has had pretty much since the summertime has been rough as far as reading goes, so hopefully I'll get myself back into gear soon. But let's get through these 30 books. I'm not going to spend too much time on synopses, but I will mention a little bit about my history with them as it feels necessary, but we're going to try to run through these relatively quickly since there are 30 of them. I have organized them approximately by time period. I have 4 different sections that we'll go through, but they aren't like to the year, they're just kind of general centuries and stuff. So the first one I have is the Aeneid by Virgil, and I have read parts of this in college, but I've never read the whole thing, and I really want to. I thought about putting the Iliad on this list, but honestly this has been on my to-do list for longer than the Iliad has. I thought I wasn't going to do the Iliad at all, and then just this year I decided to get it. So I'm fine if it's still a few years before I get to the Iliad, and maybe I will still get to it in the next 4 years, but I definitely want to get to the Aeneid at some point. I might read this for Ancients-a-thon next year if I end up doing it, just because of my life. I'm not really sure how that readathon's going to go, but I may read this still around that same time in honor of Ancients-a-thon, and we'll just see what happens. But that is my hope with this one. Then I have a book I have started but not finished still, and that is Le Morte d'Arthur. Yes, my goal was to read this year, as well as many other King Arthur stories, and I didn't. So I really would like to actually finish this. I got that far into it, and I do really want to finish it. So definitely before I'm 30, this better be done and off my shelves. Next, I have Utopia by Thomas More. This is one where I'm not overly interested in the book itself, but I'm interested in Thomas More as a writer. I've really enjoyed some of the snippets of things that he's written that I have read before, and I really want to read kind of his main work. And yeah, I really don't have much expectation, like I said, of what this is going to mean to me or anything, but I do want to get a little deeper into his writings, and this is one that's been on my radar for a few years now, and I would like to get to it, especially because it's so short. Next, I have Roxana by Daniel Defoe. I have never read Daniel Defoe, and maybe this is a weird one to start with, but I've had this book for years and years and years, and I just need to read it. It just sounds interesting for my particular taste, and I really just want it off my shelves. So definitely, if I haven't read it in the next 4 years, I better get rid of it because it has been far too long, and it's not even that long, so I just need to freaking get to it, honestly. And last in my kind of pre-1800s grouping, I have Candide by Voltaire. This has been on my radar for a while, and I've had this copy for a few years, and it's just not very long, and I just would like to read a little bit more from this time period that's like between 1600 and 1800. I don't necessarily expect to love this book, but I want to at least have read it so that I can get it off my shelves if I don't like it or I'm not interested in keeping it, but also so that I can say I finally read it because it's been, like I said, on my radar for many years. So next we'll move into some 19th century that's not British, not UK. The first one, and probably the number one on this list that I definitely want to get to in the next 4 years. I've been so excited to read it, and I just am like, you know what, I just need to so bad, and that is The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky. I wanted to start with Crime and Punishment, and I did read that last year, and so I'm fine to read this before I read other Dostoevsky works. I have actually read Notes from Underground as well, so I have read 2 things by Dostoevsky, and I just really want to continue that. This is also my dad's favorite novel, and so I just have really wanted to read it for that reason as well. And yeah, I just really want to make sure I have read this before I'm 30 for sure. Next, I want to read The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas. I really want to get to it because it's been on my radar since I was a child pretty much, and I have had this particular copy on my shelves for a couple years now, and I would love to get it off. And I just feel silly having it on my list for so long and still not having read it when it's The Three Musketeers. I don't know. It's just ridiculous, and I really, really need to get to it. Some more French literature. I have Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert. I just have wanted to read this for years and years and still haven't. And so I just would like to get that off of my list, really. And my last French literature work on this list, as far as 19th century French literature, I have Thérèse Raquin by Émile Zola. Really, I just want to read something by Émile Zola, and this is the one I've had the longest, so I really would like to get to this one, and it's also not very long, so I really, really would like to have read some sort of work by Émile Zola before I turn 30. And the last one in this section, which is like 19th century that's not the UK, I have The Blithedale Romance by Nathaniel Hawthorne. This is really the only American literature from the 19th century that I have on this list, and really I wasn't sure if I was going to put it on this list. It was kind of one of my, I have a few spaces left, what am I going to put in this list kind of section as I was planning, and I just decided I really have developed an interest in Nathaniel Hawthorne and really found myself falling in love with The Scarlet Letter this year, and so I want to read more of his works, and I really think this is the next one I want to read. I wouldn't mind completing all of his novels. There's this one, The Marble Fawn, which I know Jennifer Brooks really loves, and then Fanchart, I believe, which was his first novel. I could be saying that title wrong, but something like that. So I wouldn't mind completing those last three, but I definitely want to get to this one in the next 4 years, if nothing else. Then we'll move into some Victorian literature. So the first one I have here is one that will be easy because I have already started it and I intend to finish it before the end of the year, and that is Sylvia's Lovers by Elizabeth Gaskell. I started this for Victober, and if you were following my Victober experience, you know Victober turned into a mess, but I still intend to complete this. I'll probably break it up throughout the month of December, and that will be one of the last things I finish this year. And I'm really excited to officially have completed all of Elizabeth Gaskell's full-length novels. That's why I want to get to this for sure in the next 4 years. If I don't finish it by the end of this year, I'll be disappointed. But if I still haven't read it 4 years from now, I will be insanely disappointed. So hopefully we'll be able to get that in there. Next, I have Romola by George Eliot. I also wouldn't mind completing George Eliot's full-length novels in the next 4 years, but I'm not going to put too much pressure on myself, as I don't mind, savoring the Victorian literature where I can. And George Eliot is still kind of intimidating to me, so I don't mind spreading out her works a little bit. But this is one I definitely want to get to as soon as possible. I wouldn't mind getting to, I think after this, I'm planning to read The Mill on the Floss, so I could see myself getting to that one. And then after that, I just have Daniel Deronda and Felix Holt, I believe, are the last two that I'll need to read as far as her full-length novels go. This one's also on my post-Victober Victorian TBR, so I definitely feel like I should trust that I'll be able to get to this in the next year even. Then I have New Grub Street by George Gissing. This is one that's just been on my TBR for so long, on my physical TBR for so long as well, and the last book I read by George Gissing was The Odd Women, and that was a few years ago, so I'd really like to continue with his work, and like I said, I've had this one on my list for ages. I apologize if you hear any banging. My neighbors suddenly decided to start doing stuff. They weren't doing anything a while ago, and then suddenly they're just walking around and dropping things, and it's gotten a little loud periodically, so hopefully it's not picking up on here, but if it is, I apologize. Anyway, moving on, the next one I have is actually not a novel. It is a play, but it is The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde. I actually just bought this, but I've had The Importance of Being Earnest on my radar for longer than almost anything else, and I just haven't read it still, and so I definitely feel like I need to get to it in the next 4 years as soon as possible. I desperately need to. This is like a collection of multiple plays by Oscar Wilde, so I don't necessarily intend to read this whole thing, but definitely The Importance of Being Earnest needs to be read by the end of these 4 years, absolutely. Then I have a couple of Dickens novels. Obviously, I want to read a lot of Dickens. I want to get through all of his full-length novels, but these are the two that have most been on like TBR possibilities and are ones that I have thought the most about, and so I decided to put them on this list because they are the ones that I like. If I haven't read these two in the next 4 years, I'll be very disappointed. The first one is Dombey and Son by Charles Dickens. I just really am excited about this one. I think I'm really going to love it. And the other one is Little Dorrit by Charles Dickens. This one I believe is actually on my list of post-Victober Victorian reads that I have, my TBR for that. But it was kind of one of the possibly this one or another thing, and so I don't know for sure that I'll get to it in the next year, but I definitely want to get to it ASAP. So those two are the Dickens that I most want to make sure I get to in the next 4 years. And the last on my list of Victorian stuff is the series I mentioned at the beginning, and that is the Barsetshire Chronicles. So I just have The Warden and Barchester Towers here. I did just read Barchester Towers for Victober and enjoyed it, and so I really want to make sure I'm continuing with this series, and I'd like to finish it in the next 4 years, which there's only 4 books left, so really I just have to read one a year and I would be able to do it. So we'll see. Hopefully I will be able to do that. The next one is Dr. Thorne, so I need to get my hands on that, and then I will be picking that up hopefully sooner rather than later, but we will see what happens in my life. And finally, we get to probably the biggest section, which, I mean, I guess, I don't know, the Victorian section is close, but I think this is a little bit bigger as far as number of books, whereas Victorian books are just long. But anyway, it's all of my 20th century literature. I don't read 20th century literature hardly at all, and it's something I really want to work on. There's just something about them that just is intimidating to me. Like, they're a lot more intellectual, I would almost say. Like, they're just very, obviously not all of them, but a lot of them are a little bit more playing with language and the presentation of story. They're more focused on exploring ideas over characters, and so it's just hard for me to get into. But I do really want to finish all of these books in the next 4 years because I've had them on my radar for an eternity. Let's start with the book that's literally been on my physical TBR the longest out of anything. That's The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. I still haven't read this. I think I mentioned this book in some sort of other TBR that was like, I need to get to it this year or something like that. Clearly, I still haven't, and I just desperately need to. I don't even think I'm going to like love it that much, but I just want to have read John Steinbeck. I want to read this book, and I still haven't. I literally got this in my junior year of high school, which at this point was like almost 10 years ago, like 9 years ago, and it's just ridiculous. Like, I just need to pick this dang book up and read it. Even if I listen to the audiobook, I don't care. I just need to know what the story is and like have it off of my TBR for pity's sake. So yes, this one desperately needs to be read in the next 4 years, and honestly, if it's not, I'm getting rid of it because that's ridiculous. Next, I have another book I've had for several years, and that is Of Human Bondage by S. Somerset Maugham? I don't know how to pronounce that. This one is one I haven't heard anybody talk about. It's just kind of one that appeared in like my research when I was like looking up different classics and stuff, and it came up and it sounded interesting and I was like, oh sure, I'll get that, and then never read it, even though it's been like 5 years. So yes, I'd like to have read this and get it off my list. If you've read this, please let me know your thoughts on it, because like I said, I've never heard anybody talk about it on BookTube or anything. It's just one that just I happened to come across and was interested in. So yes, maybe someday, hopefully in the next 4 years, I'll pick this up. Then we have Summer by Edith Wharton, which is a little bit weird, but it's really just because I've wanted to continue with Edith Wharton for several years, and this one I've had the longest, and I still haven't done that. So I'd like to have finally actually gotten to this by the time I'm 30. The next two actually are a similar story where it's like an author I want to continue with, and I just haven't for a long time, and so this is probably the next book I'm going to read by that author, and that's E.M. Forster, and specifically obviously I have A Passage to India as my next read. I've really enjoyed E.M. Forster, but there's been some aspects about his storytelling that like is weird for me. I don't know. I have a weird conflicting relationship with E.M. Forster. I feel like I like his stories, but there's just something about the way he writes that doesn't quite connect with me, and so it's just kind of a weird experience every time I pick up one of his books. But all that being said, I do really want to continue with his books, and so this definitely needs to be the next one I read since it's one of his more popular ones. And then we have The Voyage Out by Virginia Woolf. Now, this is another case of I need to get into the author. Virginia Woolf, I haven't read anything by her, and this is one I just happened to pick up years and years ago, actually like on my mission. I bought this and then sent it home so I could read it after I was done with my religious mission, and still haven't, and I feel silly about it, so I really need to get to this one. And yeah, I could try. I've been tempted to get like Mrs. Dalloway and read that since I know a lot of people suggest that is a better place to start, but I am determined to get to this specific book since I've had it so long and it's been on many TBRs and pile of possibilities, and I just need to get to it. So that one better be read in the next 4 years, and if it's not, I'm getting rid of it. Alright, sorry if the angle changed. My camera started doing something weird, and it's doing it right now, but when I went back to check on the video to see if it was appearing in the footage, like it's like this weird line across that I have never seen before, and when I went to look at the footage, it doesn't look like it's recording it. So hopefully we're all right. I was worried that there was like a crack in my camera or something because that's kind of what it looked like, but I think we're safe. So anyway, the next one I have is The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. I think the rest of these I'm mostly going to run through because I keep saying over and over, I've had it forever, I need to get to it. And we don't need any more repetition on that. So let's just continue on, but I do need to get to this. We also have Wide Sargasso Sea by Jean Rhys. This one's actually been on my TBR since high school as well. So this one is on the list of please, absolutely, or we're getting rid of it kind of a list. Next I have Passing by Nella Larson. I think this sounds really good and I'd like to read it before seeing the adaptation that came out a couple years ago, so I haven't watched it or read it yet, and that just needs to change. Next we have Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov, and this one is one I actually only recently officially decided I was going to read. I've been really intimidated by it due to the subject matter. It's just something I feel like I would have a hard time reading, and just like I really wasn't sure about the approach and if it would be something that I would feel okay with, and maybe as I read it I'll decide I don't. I'm giving myself permission, I mean obviously with all of these, to DNF, but I at least want to try this one. Based on a couple of people's comments on it, I think that I can trust that it will be a little bit more interesting and complex than I originally thought it would be, and maybe approach the topic in a better way than I originally expected. So we're going to give it a shot. Another author I need to continue with is Daphne du Maurier, and the one I've had for ages is My Cousin Rachel by Daphne du Maurier. That's all I really need to say. I read Rebecca and I've read Frenchman's Creek, and I really liked Rebecca. Frenchman's Creek, I enjoyed myself. I didn't like love it, but I enjoyed myself pretty okay, and I really want to continue. So this one better be read honestly in the next year because I've had this for a hot minute. Then I have The Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis. I think I first heard about this actually clear back in like 6th grade. That's how long I've been aware and interested in this book. But I only got my physical copy like a year or two ago, so I don't feel quite as bad because of that, but I still would really like to have it checked off my list. Then I have Lord of the Flies by William Golding. I never read this in school, and a lot of people did, and I was not one of them, and so I'd like to have read it. I also really want to get to 1984. I don't even have a physical copy of it, which is why it's not on this list, but that's one that's been on my radar for a really long time as well. But this one for sure being on my physical TBR for a couple years as well, I'd really like to get to. And number 30, the final book on this list of 30 books I need to complete before I turn 30, is Beloved by Toni Morrison. I have heard amazing things about Toni Morrison, specifically about this book, and I just really want to get into her stuff. I don't know if it will be for me, but if nothing else, I'd like to say that I have read Beloved and be able to share my thoughts on it because I've heard really interesting things about it. So that is it. That is my list of 30 books I need to try to read before I turn 30. Obviously, like I said at the beginning, there are many other classics I'd love to read, and I'm sure I'm going to get to many more than this list of 30, or I guess 33 if you count the 4 different books that are in the Barsetshire Chronicles that I need to read. Either way, I definitely feel like I can read more than this. These are just the ones that I definitely I need to read. So I think I'm going to create a spreadsheet. I haven't yet. I kind of just came up with this list last night because I was like, I have not filmed a video in far too long. Life has just gotten in the way once again of me filming, and I've really been sad about it. I also have been struggling with creative juices flowing as far as getting ideas. So I wrote this last night. I had been thinking about it for a while though, like I said. Anyway, either way, I haven't made my spreadsheet yet, but I think I'm going to, and we'll just be checking off things as I go along, and hopefully I'll be actually able to get to all 33 of these books. So let me know down below if you've read any of these books, your thoughts on them, if there's any you'd like me to prioritize to read sooner rather than later. I would love to hear. Thank you again so much for watching. I hope you are having a wonderful day, a wonderful reading week, and I will see you next time. Bye!